All right, why don't we get started? I believe this is the crowd we'll have for tonight. We do have a lot of material to get through as usual. Even though we're only going through Matthew chapter 5 tonight, you will definitely recognize at least some of this, if not all of it. And it is dense. I hope to get through it tonight. But as always, we'll see what happens. So I'll just open up in prayer and we can get started. Lord, we thank you for this day. Thank you for the people who are able to make it out. I just pray you'd be with us during this time of study, that you would help us be able to see and understand and reflect on the teachings of Christ and how they can help us to draw closer to you and understand your heart better. In your name, Jesus, I pray. Amen. All right, so it's been a few weeks. So I'll give you actually a tiny bit extra on the recap. One thing is going to be relevant. Well, it should all be relevant. I got an extra relevant thing that I want to remind you of from last time. All right, so on your sheet, just the basic recap from last week. We covered the preaching of John the Baptist. And then we talked about the baptism of Jesus. We talked about his temptation in the wilderness and the kingdom of heaven. We discussed a little bit about what that means and Jesus doing kingdom things, going around healing and casting out demons and all that kind of stuff. You good? Can we get some sheets down? Good. All right, so that was the basic recap from last week, or, last lesson. One thing that I did want to especially hit on that we did cover last week, we talked about some big ideas that Matthew is trying to present through his narrative. So this isn't on your sheet, this is on the back of the sheet from week 2. One of the big ideas was that Jesus is the true and faithful Israel, and that Matthew is intentionally also linking Jesus to Moses and David. David was a lot in week 1. Go ahead. So I'll just read straight from week 2. No, this is good. This is something I wanted to hit on. We saw between weeks 1 and 2, so we saw with the genealogy, you have the whole line of going from Abraham to David to, up to Jesus. So he's filling out basically the big roles. He's in the line of the big roles of Israel. We see Jesus playing out a version of Moses' origin story with the death of the innocents and fleeing to Egypt, where Moses was in Egypt. And we covered it a little bit, week 2, that the way Matthew takes prophecy about Israel, specifically Matthew 2:15, comes from, I believe, Hosea, out of Egypt I've called my son, where the original prophecy is talking about Israel, but Matthew applies it to Jesus being called out of Egypt. And so he's building this idea that in the ways that Israel, the man and the people, failed to follow God, he is being the faithful Israel in this instance. So in lesson 2, we saw Jesus being baptized in the Jordan River, like Israel crossing the Jordan to enter the Promised Land. And then we saw Jesus victorious from his time of temptation in the wilderness, where Israel largely failed in their wilderness wanderings. So, and this is going to continue all throughout the book, where he's setting up Jesus as the true and faithful Israel. He's setting him up as the new Moses, the new David, and greater than all of these things. So we're going to get there might be a snapshot that jumps out at you tonight about that, so I just wanted to cover that real quick. So this week is Sermon on the Mount Part 1. Like I said, it's just Matthew chapter 5. Next week, we are theoretically going to somehow cover chapters 6 and 7. But I wanted to give you an overview of Matthew 5 first. That's there on your paper. Just a quick little breakdown so you see the logic. So the first 12 verses are called the Beatitudes. I'm sure you will recognize those immediately, and that talks about who the disciple is, what kind of person the disciple is. Talks about salt and light. That's what the disciple does. There's a brief interlude about Jesus and the law, and we'll discuss it, but this is why the disciples' righteousness matters. And then we're going to see a bunch of examples, which is what the disciple looks like in practice. And you'll probably be familiar with some of those verses as well. But we're going to jump in. We're just going to read the first 12 verses of Matthew 5. And on your sheet, I say thoughts at the end, but I think we'll start with some thoughts, and we won't elaborate on anything we're going to cover in detail throughout the notes. So Matthew 5, verses 1 through 12. And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye, when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. All right, so I'm sure we've heard at least some of these at different times. Even if you haven't been in church ever, you've probably heard at least a few of these. Any opening thoughts?
Seems interesting that everything here is more like an adversity in life, and the word saying you're blessed.
Yeah, most of them don't sound like good things that you would associate with, oh yeah, I feel super blessed because I'm persecuted right now. This is great. Yeah.
I mean, I get why he says that, but, it just seems
Yeah.
counterintuitive.
It's very counterintuitive. And I'll throw this out there now. We will see for this chapter and the next chapters, Jesus will say a lot of wild things that he intends to be wild. Like he is often trying to shock you and get your attention. Some of the things he says are absurd for the sake of humor, and we'll get to some of those. And even with these, Jews are used to having lists from rabbis of like what the blessed life looks like. And what Jesus lists off here is not the typical things on the list. So unless we have some pressing question, we can go through the notes, and then we can have if there are any closing thoughts or questions when we get to the end of this section. First blank on your sheet there. Notice the mountain setting. So Matthew is having Jesus' first big public teaching set on a mountain. That's the first one that Matthew wants to tell you about. Any thoughts on why that would be? Now, the simple answer is because that's just where he went. But anything you think Matthew's doing there? Okay, I thought I primed you well enough for it. So it's a figure of Moses. Is that what you were thinking? Yeah. If you have any prophet-like figure in his first major, he's going to be giving his law on top of a mountain. Matthew is, I believe Jesus did this, but Matthew's telling it to you this way. So it's sparking this new Moses type thing, and Jesus is giving, in a sense, a new law. Next on your sheet, blessed means something like approved by God or in a state of flourishing because of God's favor. Someone talked about this on Sunday at great length. Also, and I think it's a funnier translation. So that's what I wrote there is more of like the technical definition of it. Sometimes people just would translate it as like one of the definitions would be happy. Happy is the man who whatever. And if you read some of these with that translation, it really I think the deeper translation, the deeper definition is what you're really supposed to be thinking. But if you read it as like, happy are those who mourn, it's in there. It's in there definitionally, and you're supposed to have all these ideas in your head. So it's supposed to jump out at you as like a wild thing to say as Jesus is going through and saying all of these. And I want you to notice most of the rewards to the faithful have an already but not yet type of fulfillment. And if you're not familiar with that phrase, already but not yet, that's big in what we would call like eschatology or end times things. So, for example, I forget where, but the Apostle Paul tells one of the churches that you as Christians are seated with Christ in heavenly places. So Paul is saying right now, as you're standing, your position in Christ and in relation to the Father, you are seated like in the heavenly courts in heavenly places with Christ. Now, of course, that is a greater future reality, but Paul is saying even in the here and now, this is how this plays out. So in Jesus' teachings here, for example, just picking, where's hunger and thirst for righteousness? Where's that one? That's just an easy, verse 6. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Now you could see in normal life someone who is hungry for righteousness, for things to be made right, whether that's in a sense of justice, whether that's right relationship with God, right relationship with people. Someone who hungers and thirsts for righteousness, Jesus says that person will be filled. But of course not always. Like, there is a much greater sense in which righteousness, justice, things like this will be fulfilled fully in the age to come. So as you see, even blessed are they who mourn, for they shall be comforted, you can see that play out in the real world, and then you see that play out at the end of days as God is like the true and great comforter. So most of these things have an already but not yet type of fulfillment. So for these, I didn't want to just work through these verse by verse because we just don't have time for that, unfortunately. So I wanted to focus on a few often misunderstood ones, and then feel free to ask any other questions. Verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit. What does this mean? Any ideas? That'd be a simple way to put it. Yeah, not proud. Yeah, so there are a couple references here. We don't have to look them up, but just so you know I'm not making it up. Isaiah 57:15 and Psalm 51:17. These are interesting because it says similar things to what Christ is saying here, that basically God is like looking for or honoring those who are poor in spirit. And it's interesting because Psalm 51 is written by King David in his time of mourning for his own sin. So he's definitely not poor, like how we normally think of having no money. He's the king of Israel. But it is this posture of the spirit of being humble, like you said, just not being proud, being humble before God, even if you're the king of a nation, like having dependence on God as if you're someone in poverty who's dependent on someone else. The meek shall inherit the earth, verse 5. I think this often gets misunderstood, and with good reason. There's a lot of reasons to misunderstand this, and I'll read something to you after this. How would you define meek? Or how do you think other people typically, if you feel like you have a good answer for it, how do you think it often gets misunderstood? Small, yeah. Kind of like weak, it even rhymes in English, so it works well. That's how we tend to think of it, like the weak will inherit the earth, the downtrodden will inherit the earth, something like that. Has anyone heard a different definition of it?
I heard it means like quiet strength.
Quiet strength?
Yeah.
Okay, yep.
Acting on impulse, kind of your self-contained.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. Something strength under control is something like that. So here within lies the problem. So we hear something like the meek will inherit the earth, and that sounds like one of Jesus's radical sayings, because we all look around and you don't normally see the meek inherit the earth. You see the strong, the violent, the sinister, however you want to put it. You definitely see inheriting the land, the earth, taken by force. That's how we normally see the world play out. So Jesus is directly quoting Psalm 37:11. So the issue with the word meek, as far as just understanding what it means, it gets a little confusing. So in classical Greek, so the Bible is written in Koine Greek, that's common Greek around, the time that this was written, around the turn of the century, or millennium, although I guess they didn't think about it as the turn of the millennium back then. So in classical Greek, like Plato, Aristotle, this word in Greek is praus. This isn't on your notes. This was it was a term used for a tamed animal, like a horse. Not weak, but strength harnessed. Aristotle used it for the golden mean between excessive anger and apathy, or controlled power. So that's classical Greek. That's how Aristotle used this a lot. It gets tricky because then, of course, the psalm that Jesus is quoting was written in Hebrew originally. Now, fortunately, before Jesus was born, about 200-300 years, the Jewish scholars made a Greek translation of the Old Testament. That's called the Septuagint. So in the Septuagint, they use praus to translate a Hebrew word which normally means humble, lowly, afflicted, or poor. In the Old Testament, this word usually describes the posture of those dependent on God because they lack earthly power. So you see the issue here is we're trying to figure out what it means. So both definitions that were given here tonight are like, in classical Greek it means this, in the Jewish Greek, if we can put it that way, it means like the weak, the downtrodden, stuff like that. So as it is, it kind of makes you question the Jewish translator's decision to use that word. It's interesting, though, because Jesus elsewhere describes himself as gentle, which is actually the same Greek word, and lowly in heart. He enters Jerusalem gentle and mounted on a donkey. In both cases, it's humility and dependence on God, not dominance. But then there's also cases where the Hebrew word is used for someone who does have power, but is characterized by humility before God. The classic example, kind of the funny example, if you've heard the verse that, Moses was very meek, more than, KJV typically uses humble, I think, but, more than all the people who were on the face of the earth. Moses is leading a roughly 2 million people nation with a massive army and all the gold that God gave him from Egypt. He is by no means powerless, but he's fully dependent on God. So, Very, very long story short, I probably spent way too much time on that definition. But as we're thinking of meek, it does often mean the weak, the downtrodden, the powerless. But it's sort of like poor in spirit, where the way it gets used throughout the scriptures, it's whether you're actually weak, downtrodden, powerless. But if you're not, if you're David, if you're Moses, if you're Jesus, you're not relying on your power, your dominance, your ability. It's in submission to God. So it kind of takes, you kind of end up with both definitions, and I think that's why they picked this word to use, because it has both ideas baked into it. And I'm sorry that ancient language translation just gets really complicated, and there's just so many ideas packed in there. All right, I've already spent like 10 minutes too long on this section. So I'll let you think about the last thing in that section, the blessed are those who are persecuted. What do you think about this? Why is it true, or why is it radical? I think probably the why is it radical is the more real question. All right, are we good to move on to salt and light? Anything else we need here? I know we could spend several hours here. That's how most of the book's going to go. Yeah. Okay. Few short verses. Matthew 5:13 through 16. Jesus said, "Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under the foot of men. Ye are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." Salt and light, what are we getting at here? What does that mean? Yeah, so I think salt is the trickier one. Like, as we typically understand metaphors of light and darkness, I've heard so many definitions of, why he says salt. Why are you the salt of the earth? And I hear preachers, all sorts of things. And the reference that I have, the last verse next to the salt blank, that Colossians 4:6, that's where Paul says, "Let your speech be seasoned with salt." So I've heard preachers say all sorts of things. It's like, in the ancient world, salt preserves, like you salt the fish, the meat, stuff like that. It can be, it's used for flavor, and makes things a little bit better, makes them taste good. And I knew that all seemed strange because Jesus didn't say any of that, until I finally was just like cruising through Leviticus one day. Can someone look up Leviticus 2:13 and read that? Great, thank you. Yeah, very basic concept, and this is true across most cultures, that salt is a symbol for purification. So it's difficult. It can be used to clean wounds. It tends to kill a lot of bacteria. The same reason it preserves food. It kills bacteria and stuff like that, dries it out. So not only in Israel, but many cultures, they add salt to a sacrifice. In the same way that the priests wash their hands as a symbol of purity, you add salt to a sacrifice that you're giving to God. It's considered a purifying element. So I'm like, okay, maybe Jesus, the rabbi, and Paul, the ex-Pharisee, maybe they're thinking all these other things and about how it makes things taste good. Or maybe they have the Levitical law in mind, and they're thinking, oh yeah, in the same way that, our sacrifices are supposed to be pure and holy and purified, yeah, your presence should be pure and holy, and you should give light to those around you and do your good works so that people can see the light and glorify God in heaven. Yeah, maybe it makes things taste good, but I don't think that's the core idea from these two men who knew the law well. Go ahead. Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's the thing. In a way, it's going to be difficult to actually pin down, like, oh, Jesus said be salt, so do this one thing. But it's like he's talking about being like a holy, purifying, godly influence element. So, yeah. So when you're, yeah. So it will look like that on occasions. Yeah. Yeah, so he's not giving like a clear directive on exactly what this is supposed to look like. But when he says, be salt, be light, it's kind of a broad idea of how his followers should be. All right, and then another couple verses, 17 through 20. All right, think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. Whosoever therefore shall break one of the least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say unto you that, except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter the kingdom of heaven. Have we heard this before? Probably. Okay, good answer. Yeah, there's a lot in those little verses. What do you think they mean? Or let's start with, what does it mean that Jesus has come to fulfill the law? Because I always thought we're Christians, so we don't need to worry about the law anymore. So what does this mean? All those are solid answers. There's definitely a sense in which we don't worry about the law because Jesus fulfilled it. His sacrifice is, of course, the thing that fulfills it. And then, it's interesting. So when he says he's coming to to fulfill the law, it has the idea of like to fill it full. Like that's literally how you would break that down in what he's saying. So it's not really whatever is lacking in the law, but the thing that the law was supposed to be, he's coming to accomplish. And we'll be able to walk through that in more detail throughout the chapters, because I know that if you're not already on board with what I'm saying, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, big example. The Jewish law has the Lamb of God, like the atonement lamb. Okay, so Jesus is literally going to do the thing that he's saying the law was pointing to. So he's going to fulfill that sacrifice. So very small example, not small example, singular example of what he's saying across this entire book and how the apostles are going to understand what he did. Not that the law was bad, but that they are, in order to do a whole lot of different things. They do things for the nation of Israel to be distinct, and that's going to be its whole thing. It has different feasts and ceremonies and sacrifices that Jesus is going to directly fulfill. And so in a way we keep the law because we have them fulfilled in Christ. I'm sorry, this is way too technical of a definition that I don't have time to get into. It will unfold throughout the book of Matthew. I promise you that. Okay.
Can I ask
verse
20, where it says, "For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and it's as though Jesus is already pointing out that the Pharisees, weren't right." I mean,
he's taken some opening shots a little bit. But also, and this is worth pointing out because it's not, they're usually like the comic book villains in our version of how we read the gospel, the scribes, the Pharisees, because they're always kind of pushing back against Jesus. This is one of those things that would have been shocking for people to hear, because the scribes and Pharisees are known for, they follow the law just to the letter. And like to the, as Jesus said, the jot and tittle. Those are like literally the Hebrew equivalents of dotting your I's, crossing your T's, like those little symbols. So if you're saying, okay, in order to enter the kingdom of heaven, you have to be more righteous than them, well, they think, how can I possibly follow the law better than the guy, like the super law followers? How do I do that? That should be a shocking statement. And he's definitely signaling what he's going to do to fulfill the law with his sacrifice. That's a huge part of it. But then even just as disciples, what we're going to read next, which a lot of which you've probably heard, is also going to help us understand what he's doing with fulfilling the law in a different sense, where he's going to start showing us that it's not just, I did the thing, I checked the box that the law required, but he's going to start digging into the heart issues behind the law. And there's a whole lot to it, but I think reading some of how he's going to interpret the law will help us see, at least as disciples, what he means by that. All right, so I'm just going to read should be a big old chunk of text here. Just looking at the clock, I think you guys over-explained some things or something. I don't know why we're running behind. Let's just read the text. I'm basically just going to do 21 through the end of the chapter, and we'll see how far we get. Matthew 5:21, ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not kill. Whoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whosoever shall say to his brother, Raka, that means thou fool. No, it doesn't. Raka shall be in danger of the council, but whosoever shall say thou fool shall be in danger of hellfire. Therefore, if thou bring thy gift to the altar, and there rememberest that thy brother has aught against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar, and go thy way. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift. Agree with thine adversary quickly, while thou art in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison. Verily I say unto thee, thou shalt by no means come out till thou hast paid the utmost farthing. Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you, that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. And if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out, cast it from thee, for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off, cast it from thee, for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. It has been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery. Whosoever shall marry her that is divorced committeth adultery. Again ye have heard it said by them of old time, thou shalt not forswear thyself, but thou shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou canst not make one hair white or black. But let your communications be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh evil. Ye have heard that it has been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. If any man will sue thee at law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. Whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn thou not away. Ye have heard that it has been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor, and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh the sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same? And if ye salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans so? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. That was a lot of verses. That was more than half the chapter in one go. All right, we got like 15 minutes left. Do I start with opening questions and see where we get, or do we just start tearing through the notes and see where we get? We'll go with the notes. All right. All right, so a few things, and whenever we get there, I'll take any questions I can. Obviously, we can't explain all this in explicit detail, but I'll do what I can. So on your sheet here, I just have, note the authority with which Christ speaks. It said, you've heard it said, but I say, which is a big deal when you're interpreting the law of Moses. You heard the law of Moses. What I'm telling you, it's not even, here's what I think it means. You heard it said, but I tell you. So Jesus is showing that he has authority apart from Moses, but not in opposition to Moses, because he doesn't contradict the law of Moses. He delves in deeper. So that last line on the sheet here, Jesus takes core commandments, thou shalt not kill, no adultery, and strikes at the heart issues underlying them. And this is a simple, basic example of him saying your righteousness needs to be greater than that of the scribes and the Pharisees. Saying, yeah, you can't just check the box, cool, you haven't killed anyone, which, cool, you haven't killed anyone. That's an awesome start. But then, okay, but yeah, how's the hate in your heart doing? Because these are interrelated things. On the back of your sheet, this method of meditative interpretation shouldn't have been radical. This is what the law is meant for. Psalm 1 and 2, I meditate on your law day and night. But leaders of the time considered how to make the law more difficult, not how to apply it to the heart. And we'll see this throughout the ministry of Jesus as well, where Jesus is getting in trouble for things and being accused of breaking the law when he's not actually breaking the law of Moses. He's breaking rules that they added on in order to do what they considered keeping the law of Moses, usually while completely missing the underlying spirit and meaning of the law in the process. This will work. So, because on your sheet here I have, since we're short on time, this will actually work to bring them all together. No, this is perfect. Because in verses 21 through 26, we see murder and anger equated. And I asked the question, is anger truly equivalent to murder? No. Yeah, no. So it's definitely the heart of the issue, You're probably not murdering someone without anger towards them, okay? Otherwise we call it something different, So even the law of Moses, murder is a capital offense. Anger and hatred is not. Now, Jesus is trying to go deeper with it. Same thing in verses 27 through 32, you have adultery and lust, basically, being paired together. And it's cool, the Pharisees haven't committed adultery, but there's a deeper heart issue with sexual sin. So while he compares murder and anger, adultery and lust, it should be clear that these are not equal, but they are very related. And if you're actually seeking righteousness, even by following the law, you can't just stay surface with it, okay? So as this relates to taking oaths, it seems like an odd statement. So different Christian groups have taken this in different ways over the millennia, where like some of the, like especially like early Anabaptists, some of the Puritans, where they will make no like, swear you in at court? Nope, I don't make oaths like that. Pledge of allegiance? Nope, I don't make any kind of oath or pledge to anyone other than Christ. So you have those kind of interpretations. Back in the day, Jesus' day, it was very common to like, and we unfortunately will still say like, oh, I swear to God, you know, when you're trying to convince someone that what you're saying is more authoritative, whether it's true or not. So in classic Pharisaical fashion back then, they established all sorts of rules about how you could like swear on things to boost your validity. So first century Jewish man, oh, you do not say, I swear, like I swear by God, because God's a much higher authority. You don't want to bring him involved, and that would be considered blasphemous. Sometimes they would say, I swear by the temple, because the temple, house of God, it's got to be awesome. That's a big deal. You're swearing by that. It's like, oh, they swear on my mother's grave. It's like, you know, oh, I swear on the temple of God. And then they started making laws because they go, well, no, you can't swear like on God because that's blasphemous. And you don't want to swear on the house of God. That's blasphemous. You can swear by like the gold in the temple. And so they start making these like crazy things of like, this is an okay thing to swear on. This is not an okay thing to make your oaths and swear and make like verbal contracts or, you know, whatever it is. Any way you're trying to like boost the veracity of what you're saying. So Jesus, it's funny, he walks it down a little bit. So let's start in verse 34. He's saying, but I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, heaven's God's throne, nor by earth, for it's his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, it's the city of the great king. Don't even swear like on your own authority, because you can't make one hair black or white on your head. Like you don't even have control over yourself. Let your communication, to not put it in King James, let your communications just be like yes, yes, no, no. Basically, the idea is your speech should be honest, so that I should be able to say to you like, hey, is this true? And I can say, yes. My word is, like kind of your word is your bond. I can say to you, yes or no. I don't have to say, yes, and I swear by the holy city, Jerusalem, So he's taking a common practice of the day about basically honesty in speech and basically being like, why do you have to swear by something, especially something related to God, for people to believe that you're telling the truth? Like, shouldn't the truth just be your natural your natural way of being? But yeah, he's pairing up all these equivalents, and some of the things that he's talking about are directly from the law of Moses, like you've heard it said that you shall not kill. And then when he's talking about oaths, and we're probably not going to get to it tonight, but when he's talking about eye for an eye, when he's talking about love your neighbor, hate your enemy, that's not from the law of Moses. That sounds like a great way to live, really simplifies things. But so he's doing a mixture of commentating and adding depth to the law of Moses, and then like with some of these oaths and with love your neighbor, hate your enemy, he's also commenting on the heart behind common cultural practices in his day. Even the divorce section, he'll get into in much greater detail later in the book. And he's not so much, he's commenting on it from a biblical perspective, but not, it's more of like a cultural debate that's going on at that time that you can actually find in other Jewish sources, and that's very interesting as well. All right, so we have 5 minutes left. Thank you. This is an important distinction. I do throw around some of these terms without realizing, we need to define some of these. This is great. Okay, so you have two main religious groups in and around Jerusalem. Yeah, we talked about the Essenes out in the desert. They don't have much cultural power because they're off out in the desert. Okay, so you have particularly the Pharisees and the Sadducees. You've probably heard of both of these groups. Sadducees, they'll come up later, mostly when Jesus is in Jerusalem, because they're more of the elite priestly class, and they have their own views on, they don't even consider some of the Old Testament to be authoritative. They kind of stick to the law of Moses. They're an odd group that we actually don't know a ton about their direct beliefs outside of the New Testament and some writings. But they were basically the class around the temple, the aristocracy of the Jewish priests. The Pharisees were more of the common rabbis, in a sense. So while you have a large concentration of the wealthier Sadducees at the actual temple, who's running your local synagogue? Probably a Pharisee. Who's teaching on the street corner? Probably a Pharisee. They weren't always completely in ministry. They might have other jobs. They might even the Apostle Paul had his trade of tent making, because even as a Pharisee before he became a Christian, he would have needed a trade. But what they basically did, they were like the rabbis of the people, and being often running the synagogues, they end up being in charge of the interpretation of the law to the common people as they gather to hear the law on the Sabbath. So, and over a few hundred years, you have interpretive traditions, and they loved to endlessly debate on what things meant. And some of it is very well intended, because, the Jews spent I was going to say 400 years. That's completely wrong. 70 years in exile in Babylon, in essence, because they didn't follow the law of God. Now, they broke some pretty big laws for centuries. But there comes this idea of, hey, we're not doing this again. We are going to follow the law of God. We are going to be a faithful people. And then a law comes up honor the Sabbath, keep it holy. You should do no work on the Sabbath. Well, that's kind of vague. And if you're trying to get God to bless your people and avoid being exiled to another foreign country, what's work? How far can you walk before you're not going for a leisurely stroll and this becomes a military march? I need to get water for the family. Can you get water for the family? I mean, that's kind of what you do in a day's work. Can you what can you do? What's considered work? So they debate, they write things, they interpret things, they teach things. So over a long period of time, you end up with what is already a large 613 laws of Moses to begin with. And then you get all these laws on top of it that they are constantly teaching the people. Well, here's how you don't work on Sabbath. You can do this, but you can't do that. You can do this, you can't do that. Don't even think about doing this. In Jerusalem, they had mile markers around the city because, like I was saying with walking, that was an actual example. You could walk so many miles in a day before it was considered work. You could go for a nice stroll in the afternoon, but don't go too far. Now you're on a hike, and that's a problem. So, yeah, as Jesus is talking about the Pharisees, they tried to keep the law to an excessive degree. Yeah, no, he's worried about the heart of the law, the spirit of the law, and the culture in his day was by and large concerned with adding things on to keep the law in the most technical possible sense and find the best loopholes they could. And that's still a thing. So the idea is that, you were mentioning some of the very modern practices for like keeping the Sabbath. And so there's this idea in Jewish thought. So the law of God is perfect, which, cool, I agree with you. So what they mean by that is if I can find a loophole, like if I can find a way to, like if I can get someone to turn the light on for me, but I can't turn on the light because that would be work. Well, God's law is perfect, so there's no way I can circumvent the law. Like, if I follow the law, even if you think, oh, it's loophole, it's not a loophole. The law of God's perfect. So anything I find that still allows me to fulfill the law is completely okay. This is a similar thing if you know Amish people. Like you get a lot of weird stuff like that. I can say that because they're not going to watch this video. Just how it is. Yeah. So, yeah. All right, so we did not get through this. We got through most of it. And I think we hit enough, I'll find a way to work this in so we can finish up. If we didn't get through this, I'm really skeptical about putting chapters 6 and 7 together. But we'll see how it goes. We didn't get to any proper discussion questions, but this is good. We covered a lot of good ground, and hopefully we have some better understanding. I probably confused you more in certain areas. We'll see if that clears up. All right. Well, we should get wrapped up. We'll see what happens next week. I mean, we'll be here. I mean, as far as getting through another 2 chapters. We'll close in prayer, see what happens next week. All right. Lord, thank you for this night. Thank you for the time of studying your word. I pray we were able to bring some clarity to some of the teachings of Jesus, and just pray you'd help us to consider what these concepts mean for our lives, especially the idea of just getting past some of the outer things and really digging at the heart of what you're trying to say. Pray we'd be able to follow Christ in that example. So Lord, we thank you for this time of study. Pray you'd bring us back safely next week. In your name, Jesus, I pray. Amen.